We're back. No, just kidding. That was my Mike Francesa. Never good at impressions. We're back here on Beyond the Box Score, and I'm so excited to be back talking football with Jacob Gibbs. We have been waiting. We have been grinding tape of these rookie quarterbacks. Jacob sent me like 17 different cut-ups of the rookie quarterback class that I got a chance to dive through. I've been watching. That's not going to be today's show, but really exciting times here on Beyond the Box Score. Thank you so much for joining us. It wouldn't be Beyond the Box Score if we didn't start 9 minutes late after the set time. Just go in knowing that's the case. Go in knowing it's going to go be a long show. And today we're going to talk about a lot of players that we feel we're not ready to give up on. You may call them bust. We don't call them bust. We call them value buying opportunities. Before we do any of that, I do want to talk a little bit about what's coming on this show and on this channel, or the new Beyond the Box Score YouTube channel. But before any of that, I haven't talked to you in a while, Jacob. How have you been, and what have you accomplished so far in the last few weeks since the end of the fantasy football season? Anything good?
Yeah, man. I got a girlfriend. I'm doing some like personal moves here. And I'm watching a lot of Saints and Titans and Giants football, a lot of this
Those
stuff.
two things don't seem to associate at all together.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's truly amazing that I do have a girlfriend. But yeah, it's been a good off season. I've been watching some of the movies that were on the Dan Schneider hit list here. So I got to Rounders. That was really good. I got to Grand Budapest Hotel. I'd never seen that. That was super fun. It was really fun. Yeah, it was really fun. But yeah, when I am working, it's just watching some of the worst football that I wasn't able to get to this year. But like you said, really excited to talk about a lot of these players. We got a lot planned for you guys this offseason. Saw somebody. It's been fun to see the reception when people see that like Beyond the Box Score is coming back. Somebody was like, "Yeah, honestly, I've been feeling too healthy. I feel like it's time for me to get sick again."
Oh, it's time to get sick again. Get sick with the stats. Get sick with the film. And I will say this: I am very proud of you for watching those two movies. I now need to do something for you and watch some of the anime. It's time. The sickest thing I heard this offseason, or it's not even an offseason, but in these last few weeks since the Beyond the Box Score show took its little hiatus and the fantasy football season ended, was that your new girlfriend is listening to all of our podcasts. That is maybe the back listening to content that has nothing to do with anything right now from the past fantasy season. But it's also at the same time very scary because she's going to get to know me in a way that I'm not so sure I want her to. But today we are talking about other things. And I want to start by saying the Beyond the Box Score show is about to get its own YouTube channel. And we've got a full off-season schedule planned already. Jacob and I have been grinding. We've been talking about what we want to do. There's all different kind of ideas bouncing back and forth. It's all the stuff that you guys will love. It's going to be deep dives when it comes to film on players. We really want to start, or maybe really focus at first on some of these rookie quarterbacks. Can we find value for you, not just in what our projection is for those rookies and second-year quarterbacks going into year 2 and 3, because we'll also hit Caleb and Trent and some of these other quarterbacks, but also the ancillary pieces, right? And that's important too. But I really think where we're going to stand out as a channel, at least this is my hope, Jacob, is when we hit 2026 NFL draft coverage, because that's not something you can get everywhere in the fantasy football world. And if you can, it's not always something you can get from a deep dive analysis with advanced stats we're going to hit you with and the film. So that's really exciting. But what we're going to need from you guys, the sickos that are amazing award-winning Beyond the Box Score fans, is help support it at first. When we do debut the YouTube channel, the new channel, I need you to help us by liking the video right now. Hit the like button, hover that hand over that mouse. You probably haven't heard me say that in a while, but you're going to hear it a lot. Hover that hand over that mouse, hit the like button, and also hype the video. That's a new thing. Hype helps. Please tell your friends, subscribe to the channel. I know some people want to safeguard the content, which I do weirdly also appreciate in some ways, and I always have and will, but at the same time, it doesn't really help us grow the show. So please tell your friends about the show, at least have them like it. And yeah, we're going to be delivering the content. I'm really excited, man. It's a great time of the year. This is the time of the year where really and truly, Jacob, only, and I mean only, the fantasy football sickos are interested in fantasy football content right now.
Yeah, for real. All right. I mean, with that said, let's get into these players, man. Like, that's what they're here for.
It's time. All right. So we're talking players we are not, players we still believe in today. So these are, you call them bust. We don't call them bust yet. And let's start with the boy, the man, the myth, the legend, the player who devastated more than a few rosters of Jacob and mine this season. But I did fight through one of them and win a championship in one of the leagues where I drafted him. Yeah, just because, remember, it was so cheap to win him in auctions. But that man is Brock Bowers going into year 3 after a stunningly good rookie season where the entire offense was focused around him, to a disappointing second season where he was injured early, played through the injury, then had to sit more games. It was like, I'm not really playing at my high level. When he came back, the offense was very disjointed. And now we're rolling into a brand new situation where we are getting Clint Kubiak, 1, 2, Fernando the Dozer Mendoza is most likely going to be quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, that is not a guarantee. They may start Geno to start next season. He's still under contract. Remember, they extended him when they traded for him last offseason. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about Mendoza. What I want to focus on is just Brock Bowers. If I can share my screen here.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a bust, like, and most of the players we're going to talk about today were busts, and there's no way around that. But even still, like, what he's done is truly incredible. So the context I have here is he's second behind only George Kittle in terms of the most receiving yards across an initial 2 seasons at the tight end position. This is dating back to 2000, which we're talking about George Kittle dropped into Kyle Shanahan. We're talking about Rob Gronkowski up in this range, Jimmy Graham catching passes from Drew Brees. It's really, really, really unprecedented to be putting up this type of production at the tight end position in general through 2 years. Like, he's up here with only 3 or 4 guys who've ever done it. And it's coming in this Raiders offense, which is just pretty mind-blowing and does leave, I think, so much potential on the table for Bowers. And so if you were around this past draft season, you might not like hearing some of the same things here. You're gonna run into that with some of these players where it's like, well, I bought into this reasoning and then it didn't pay out for me.
Right.
I don't think that should take anything away from the fact that it could happen. Like, there still is really compelling evidence that it could happen if it gets any better. And there's a reason the Raiders are picking first overall, is because it was like pretty much league worst offensively. No offensive line play, terrible quarterback play. Back-to-back years now, the offensive scheme has not been very good. So even more specifically here than just the raw yardage, and I think this helps kind of account for the offensive circumstance of stuff that I've alluded to, is the highest percentage of team receiving yards across an initial 2 seasons. It's 20% for Rob Gronkowski, 22% for George Kittle, and 25% for Brock Bowers. So 25% of the receiving yards, 31% of the receiving touchdowns. So Gronk is the only one who's topped that. His rate was 36%. And then you've got Bowers at 31% of the receiving touchdowns through 2 years, and Antonio Gates at 30% of the receiving touchdowns through 2 years. So really, really just a clear, right now on like an all-time career arc. And I think it lines up with the film. It lines up with the draft capital. Everything is there. And so now we've got Clint Kubiak coming in, who we've seen across multiple different offenses maximize different types of players. And I think has proven to be very adaptive with both his play designing and his play calling, and potentially, a good quarterback. I will get to Mendoza later. We're going to spend a lot of time with the rookies this offseason for sure. And so I think there's a ton of reason for optimism. I would still have Bowers ahead of Trey McBride for Dynasty. I think I don't really feel any different about him than I did last year. And now it kind of feels like with a coach and a young QB, we're kind of like potentially insulated for the long haul. Whereas last year was just a bet on talent and a hope that Geno could turn things around. But, Geno was an aging quarterback, but like now it's like we've got some potentially like good bones here in terms of the infrastructure. So it's a really exciting time for him. And I think really like this might be your last chance to even be able to get him in Dynasty, because like going into this past year, he was kind of untouchable, especially in any sort of like tight end premium type of league. And right now it does feel like there's a lot of tight ends that have moved up the rankings, and you might be able to kind of like leverage them into Bowers. You might be able to go from McBride to Bowers or whatever, Harold Fannin even, or something like that. You may be able to go to Bowers if the Bowers person had a rough experience this year, had a lot of eggs in that basket and then it backfired. You might be able to go get Brock Bowers.
It's going to be very interesting. So I think the key components that you outlined, we've never had any doubt in his talent. We spent all that time watching his film and then comparing some of the rookie year stats. And it was like, okay, well, I don't want to miss out on drafting Brock Bowers. Me and you felt very similar about this. I don't want to miss out on drafting him in that 14 to 20 range of last year overall, or from my standpoint, since I mostly only play in auction leagues, at that price point, because we felt like, okay, I could be missing out on a generational player and there's no real reason not to. And I love the points you made last offseason about, all right, Will, Geno is going to be able to, I think at least, unlock a verticality to Bowers' game, which I still think could have been possible, Jacob, honestly, if Bowers never got hurt. Now, it's the factor I think that we didn't maybe factor in enough last year in our evaluation of Brock Bowers, because I'm looking back on it now, is one, we knew the projected point total for the Raiders was going to be low. And we looked at it ourselves and we're like, yeah, I kind of feel like that's bad by Vegas, but at the same time, no, like Vegas is probably right on this. And then two, I don't think any one of us really properly assessed how bad that offensive line was going to be. And part of it, yeah, Colton Miller going down. When you lose an elite dominant left tackle like that, you don't really have anything behind him at the tackle position, which most teams don't, but they really don't. The Raiders, it's going to be a problem. They also lost Ben Powers-Johnson at some point in the season, who was their second best offensive lineman. It was just an absolute mess. And now I feel like going into this offseason, Jacob, Kubiak is there. So we have the head coach that we believe in, the ability to scheme open offense. Mendoza is going to be there. And I'm not so positively sure on Mendoza yet, but there are a lot of aspects about Mendoza's game from the little I've seen from a film standpoint, but the more I've seen from just the watching broadcast angle in the games that I like. And I really like his ability to potentially unlock that verticality I just mentioned with back shoulders, with seam balls. That's something he did a lot at Indiana in that offense. Very different offense he's going to be running with Kubiak, but I trust his ability. From everything I've heard from Mendoza, he seems like a guy who lives, breathes, and talks ball really well and understands concepts and is going to be able to potentially read the field well. Now, the question is, can they get this offensive line passable in one offseason? We've seen big turnarounds in the offensive line. Just look at what the Bears did last year with Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson. They had a massive turnaround from an offensive line standpoint in just one season. And I think the Raiders are well aware that it's their most important need for the offseason. So I do expect them to go out there and be a team that takes the biggest free agent offensive lineman off the market and signs him and potentially makes a trade like the Bears did, because I really think that's where the value is. So with that said, I'm pointing up as well. I just do want to note one thing about Brock Bowers that does scare me a little bit, Jacob. I did feel like that, and I remember we talked about this a lot on the show. I did feel like that rookie year offense that he played in, I believe was it Van Pelt, or who was the OC of the Raiders? Yep. It was Van Pelt. He essentially just designed the entire offense around Brock Bowers. I don't think that's going to be the case with Kubiak. Nothing in Kubiak's history suggests that will be. So that's my one concern. Like, I see these stats. I appreciate these stats that you bring up. I appreciate the historical context of them, but I think they're a little bit skewed just by how force-fed Bowers was during that rookie season.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you had the same target share and the same receiving yardage share and they were like a middle-of-the-pack offense, then he would be the best tight end of all time statistically.
And that's the hope. The hope is we get the jump in the scoring and the touchdowns from an upgrade in offense.
Right. Yeah, we don't need him to have that rookie season target share.
Sure.
Because watch the dude. He's one of the best players in the NFL, you know? So if he's in a decent offense, he's going to make big plays. If he's in an offense that can't really make big plays, he's not going to, and he's just going to have a bunch of the crap plays that he's had, a bunch of little short plays and stuff. I think people can't really wrap their heads around what Bowers could be because we haven't seen anything close to resembling it so far.
Right.
Anytime he's had any opportunity to like make big plays, make plays after the catch and stuff, it's like, look at week one. His week one game, like
right.
All of a sudden it just ballooned into this like 130 yards or whatever, just like out of nowhere. It kind of seemed like it wasn't. Like I was getting a little nervous early on, and it's just like, oh yeah, this can be so easy when we start getting him clean looks.
And that might have been the only game he's healthy all year.
That's what I'm saying. We just like haven't really gotten many glimpses of it. But I think it could be really, really cool, and I'm extremely excited about the offensive coordinator hire. So with that said, let's transition to Ashton Jeanty, another guy we have not had many real glimpses of what it could be. I don't think it was so congested this year. There's a ton of stats that contextualize that. We've talked about that a lot. Let me just share my screen though and show you what it has been like when he's actually gotten room to run. So what I've got here is on runs where there was at least 1 yard before initial contact made with the defender in 2025. And it's just comparing Jeanty's numbers to Bijan Robinson, and they're basically identical across the board: yards per rush, success rate, missed tackles forced. The one that's not identical is Jeanty averaged 3.8 yards after contact per rush on these runs where he had at least 1 yard blocked. Bijan had a good rate, 2.8. Jeanty's was the best in the NFL, 3.4. That's per the Fantasy Points data suite. Of course, always shout out to them. And it's a decent sample size. Here's the list of the top 15. It was on 137 carries, which is more than I would have expected having watched the Raiders, but he got the rock so many times that 137 is actually only like a third of his carries or whatever. But yeah, if he gets room, I think that Jeanty has the chance to be really, really good, right? I mean, it's another one where it seems really obvious, but I still think like people are letting this year negatively like kind of flavor their impression of Jeanty, and it's like, I don't know, man. He had 1,200 plus scrimmage yards, like he had 10 touchdowns in this offense. Like he showed some explosive plays, even though it was like pretty obvious, especially with Bowers hurt, that like everything had to go through him. They could barely even have a functional drop back game at all. So it was like pretty much just key on Jeanty, and you don't have to worry at all about the Raiders. And still he had a decently productive year. And so I'm really curious about what it could look like going forward. For context, I did a bunch of digging on these players, and this is what I like to do during the offseason. We'll have more episodes like this where we do historical context on these guys. I looked up players who were round one running backs that had 1,200 or more scrimmage yards in the rookie season, but they averaged fewer than 4 yards per carry. And the list is Marshawn Lynch, Le'Veon Bell, Trent Richardson, Leonard Fournette, and Reggie Bush. And so Trent Richardson sucked. Reggie Bush didn't ever live up to the potential. Fournette had a few years, but they're basically usage-based years. And then Le'Veon and Marshawn Lynch were obviously really good. I don't think Le'Veon is a great comparison because truly like a lot happened for him that was transformative in terms of like year 1 to year 2, year 3. I feel like Jeanty's that guy right now. It was just a problem with the circumstances. But it's possible maybe he's not as good as I think, So we've seen some of these other guys where it's like, well, I thought Reggie Bush was really, really good, but he never really panned out the way that I thought he might. He had some good years. Trent Richardson, it just never came together. So to me, Lynch feels like the best comparison. And it wasn't until year 5 that Marshawn Lynch's career really took off. I don't know if people remember that, but it was really rough with those Buffalo offenses early on. And then when he got in a good offense, it's like, okay, yeah, this guy can have 13, 14, 1,500 yards every year, be a touchdown machine. They're not really the same type of player necessarily. But I do think that Jeanty, like if you're going to point to somebody, that might be the best comparison. Because otherwise, like statistically, and this is something we're going to run to with a lot of these players, of course, because they were disappointments this year. It would take kind of an outlier type of performance for him to turn things around after like not having a great year. But I think as we've laid out here with the Raiders, there's so many reasons why it wasn't conducive to success for Jeanty. So if you believed in the talent coming in, all of the underlying data, and I think the film too, does point towards him being every bit the player that we thought he was.
Yeah, so we'll Danometer a lot of these bust candidates, and that Danometer will just be, I'll give a 1 to 10 number on how confident I feel in these talked about busts being values next year. I'm probably more still in like the 6s range for Bowers, just not because I'm not confident in him, just because, dude, I look at the landscape and I'm like, I'll probably take the discount on Gadsden, or I'll probably take the discount on Fannin, to be clear, and I'm probably not going to make that investment in Bowers. My Danometer on Jeanty, it's 9.9 to 10.0. This will be one of my most rostered players in 2026. I can already feel it out because, like you said, no matter what people say, and no matter how many stats we're going to put at them, and the ones you put up there earlier on that screen, I don't know if you could throw it up again. I think it's worth just leaving on there for a little while. Really paint an insane picture. And that picture is, if you just give this guy even a yard before contact, even just a little bit, that first one that was comparing him and Bijan, even just a little bit of room before contact, this guy is unbelievable. And last year, he dealt with one of the worst blocking situations ever. We talk a lot about the Raiders had the worst offensive line in the NFL. Yeah, it impacted the pass game. I think it impacted the run game even more from the tape I watched. There was just so many plays that were blown up before they could ever get started for Jeanty. So if we assume the Raiders are well aware of their biggest issue and they pull a Bears-type turnaround from their offensive line this offseason, we could be looking at the best player in fantasy, or at least in the Bijan range, when you consider one, Kubiak offense, two, the potential for that I think will actually be tapped into a little bit. More passing game work for Jeanty. He is well capable of doing it. Remember, this is a player who used to be a wide receiver. He converted from wide receiver to running back at the collegiate level. He can do it. And we saw a little bit of flashes of that this year. So I think I'm more excited about him than anyone. And I know there will be people who are like, I drafted Jeanty last year at 9 overall or at 11 overall. I'm never owning him. I'm never rostering him again this year. There's just I see him on the board. I'm not going to click that name. I'll take advantage of that, Jacob. So for auction leagues, I assume we'd be buying a lot of Jeanty this offseason. Now, this is contingent on them doing things on that offensive line. Let me be clear. They can't just roll into next season with this offensive line and be like, all right, we added receivers and let's do some other stuff. So I assume they will. And Jeanty will be one of my favorite players to roster. I believe in the talent. I believe in potential of upgrade and passing game work. And I think you outlined it right there. The numbers show it. And by the way, his tape was good. His tape against the Giants at the end of the year, that was fire, dude. Like, he looked awesome in that game on film.
Yeah, he does some awesome stuff for sure. All right, let's hit our first break, and we're going to get back and talk about a favorite of the program here, Bucky Irving. Talk about historical context. Like, I've got some serious concerns. You guys know I still believe in Bucky, but this is definitely an interesting conversation. I'm excited to dig into that with you when we get back.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
This is European soccer's biggest stage.
Written in the stars! What a difference she has made!
The question is, can you handle it? Can you handle it?
The crowd here feels electric.
Stream every match of the UEFA Women's Champions League on Paramount Plus.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons.
It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
All right, so Bucky Irving, dude. Bucky had the second lowest yards over expectation per rush. That's per Next Gen Stats. Among qualified backs, only Michael Carter had a worse rate. So RYOE is not perfect. It didn't like Jeanty either, so I don't think it's necessarily great at always being able to isolate, play. It's tough with running back, play within a structure that's not good. But all of the Bucky stats are really bad. So like Jeanty, I can dig up a bunch of stats that are like, no, he was good. It was just really, really crappy circumstances around him. They're all really bad. For Bucky, so the stat where I referenced with Jeanty that like runs of 1 or more yards blocked before contact, Bucky was second to last in that. Only Kareem Hunt had a lower rate in that stat. What I've got up on the screen here is that yards after contact per rush, as a rookie, Bucky Irving had one of the best rates we've seen in the like 10 or 15 years of that data being available. This year he ranked 49th out of 49 qualifiers in yards after contact per rush. So of course this sucks. This breaks my heart as a Bucky Bull, but the stats were really, really bad. I didn't think he looked like the same guy in a lot of these games. I thought that he looked uncomfortable a lot. and was pressing a lot. The line play wasn't as good. The structure wasn't as good, just clearly. And they made an OC change right away. So they had Liam Cohen, and that was Bucky's breakout year. Then they went to Josh Grizzard last year. This year, they're bringing in some help. They've got Zach Robinson. They brought in a guy from Indiana to help with it as well. So hopefully they can get back to what was working so well with Bucky the year prior. But I don't feel great about it after digging into some historical context on running backs who have had similar year 1 and year 2 turnarounds. So what I've got is he's one of 16 running backs who topped 1,500 scrimmage yards in a rookie season dating back to 2000. It was really an amazing year. Of that group, the closest year 2 comparison, so of these running backs who had 1,500 yards or more as a rookie, the closest year 2 comparisons are Mike Anderson for the Broncos, Doug Martin, shout out Muscle Hamper for the Bucks, and Steve Slayton for the Texans. You might remember had a crazy rookie year and then completely disappeared. So if you want to find this on Twitter, I went through and looked at what happened after this, rookie season for these guys. Steve Slayton never did anything again. Anderson had one decent year. Doug Martin had another highly productive year, but it wasn't until year 4. It was year 5 for Anderson. So after this year 2 dip, the next few years were pretty rough. But that rookie season, I do think at least signifies that there could be some real talent there. We did see at least one more year for the other 2 guys. So it wasn't a big group though. That's 5 or 6 guys. So I expanded the query to rookies who had 800 or more scrimmage yards and averaged over 5 yards per carry. So that's 20 players, 12 new players that weren't in that original group. And here are the similar profiles in terms of year 2, letdowns. DeMarco Murray's on this list because he only played 10 games. And he was more efficient than Bucky. But if you look at the counting stats, the receptions, the targets, the rushes are all really similar. And then you've got Jeremy Hill, Thomas Rawls, Andre Ellington. These are some just really funny names for anybody who played fantasy 10 or 15 years ago. LeGarrette Blount are the other similar players. Mike Anderson shows up here again. Man, it's not good. And again, it's pretty small sample size of players. It's kind of weird to have a really, really good rookie year and then completely fall off the next year. But of the players who I looked at, so we're looking at, 10-ish guys now dating back to 2000 who had a really good rookie year and then not a good year at all the next year. DeMarco Murray is the one who had an awesome career. LeGarrette Blount was all right. Jeremy Hill was kind of like the guys we talked about earlier. He had one good year, but Andre Ellington never had more than 500 scrimmage yards again after his rookie season. Thomas Rawls literally just had that rookie season and then he was done. Having watched all of these players, I think Bucky's one of the best of anyone that I just talked about. DeMarco Murray is a completely different type of player. I would hear you out on Doug Martin, but I think Bucky's elusiveness, vision, contact balance, all that is just so good. I don't know. Ultimately, this and we're going to get to a couple other Lad McConkey. It's truly just a bet on a conviction bet on how good the rookie film was. But all of the historical stuff we've got here suggests that you probably should sell Bucky at his price in Dynasty and maybe not invest in him in redraft and maybe be more into some of the Sean Tucker types or whatever, or if they draft a running back or something like that. History suggests that a player like this, especially one who doesn't have first round draft capital attached to him or anything, might not keep getting chances to prove that year 1 wasn't a fluke, There really haven't been very many examples of guys like this who had a great year 1 and then a bad year 2, and then it was fine after that. They got back to rolling like they did in year 1. Most of the time, it was kind of over for them. So if you don't have extreme conviction in Bucky like I do, then he's probably a fade. And I'm really curious what you think, Dan. We're, of course, going to dig more into Bucky's film. At some point this offseason, I'll just tweet out, here's every touch of Bucky Irving's second season, so you guys can just make up your mind, because he's, to me, one of the most interesting storylines, especially for fantasy, from the 2025 season.
Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to touch on and think about, and my first reaction is, well, Bucky was not a player I really invested in last year in fantasy because of the outlook. And these are just not players I tend to invest in the range of the draft where he was going, which was the 2-3 range. 1, not certain we're going to get all red zone work. And that ended up being true. 2, not certain of his role in the pass game. So really the reliance in drafting Bucky in that range of the draft, you're saying, I believe so much in his talent and his ability to make big plays and his ability to be efficient that I don't even care that it's not the role I'm looking for. I just think he's that good. And that ultimately ended up not being the case for fantasy, but I think injuries played a big factor in it. And you mentioned some of those. I think his tape didn't look the same. But as I roll it forward, Jacob, what I think about with Bucky and his outlook, and yeah, I'll probably be a little bit uncertain of if I'm going to invest in him in the range he's going to be drafted in, because that's probably going to be the range where we see like the Rashee Rice, not him specifically for this year, but like last year's Rice range, where like you could get a Rashee Rice over a Bucky Irving, those types of receivers. What I'm going to be focusing on is really what I think, in my mind, helped us stand out as a podcast in our first year last year. It was our overextension and our reliance on what coaching means for fantasy football. And we nailed it with Ben Johnson, and we nailed it more specifically in my mind with that Jacksonville Jaguars offense, which we were both in our own ways really high on. And I think it really paid off at times, especially toward the end of the fantasy football season in the playoffs, where Trevor Lawrence, if you had him in your 2 QB leagues, like I did, you won leagues because of him and because of really, in my mind, those 2 offensive minds. I think less so the players, more so Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen. Now, with that said, we have a big move here. You mentioned it, Zach Robinson. The question that comes to mind for me is, if Zach Robinson is coming over there to Tampa, Jacob, is he bringing the wide zone scheme, or was that something that dies with Dwayne Ledford? I think it will come over with him. I think Zach Robinson is also a believer in that scheme, but I don't know for sure if it lives the same way and breathes the same way as it breathed and lived in Atlanta without Dwayne Ledford. And Dwayne Ledford, for those who don't know, is an offensive line coach who was with the Falcons last year. And a lot of people believe is one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. One of the best, not like everybody knows Jeff Stoutland. Everybody knows some of the big name offensive line coaches. But as far as teaching wide zone, Dwayne Ledford may be the best in the NFL. And that may be one of the big reasons why Atlanta was so successful in the run game. He's not coming over to Tampa. They're I think they just have the same
Ledford's going to the Ravens. Right. I think it's entirely possible that Zach Robinson will reinvent himself. He spent a lot of time with McVay. I think
I don't love that. Yeah, from a run game standpoint.
I think we could see him use a lot of man gap stuff, which would be good for Bucky. I think we could see him use a lot of stuff that Liam Cohen used. I think that's a big. I mean, they worked. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a big reason why Todd Bowles probably went after him, is like, that Liam Cohen stuff worked really well. Like, what's the closest I can get to that, And it's this guy, like it is Zach Robinson, probably. That's
I think anytime you reinvent yourself, though, there is some risk in that, because he has, we know what he can do, Zach Robinson, with the wide zone scheme. I'm not so sure. It's not always just, you can just start incorporating other concepts and it will work like that. But regardless, he's a good offensive mind, Zach Robinson. I'm not necessarily saying I'm worried about this OC hire. I think, ultimately speaking, it's probably putting them in a better position than they were last year from an OC standpoint, right? And they
almost definitely. Yeah.
Almost definitely, yeah. That's fair to say. Almost definitely. Same with Lions and those teams that have upgraded, the Chargers as well, which we'll get into over the course of the season. But the problem still remains for me for Bucky, which is I'm not guaranteed red zone work, and I'm not guaranteed the role I'm looking for in the passing game. And that, to me, is a tough player to invest major capital in.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's plenty of reasons to be nervous. So it is just a bet on like the Bucs getting better, which I think makes a lot of sense. And Zach Robinson, in addition to like being competent, he likes to play fast. That's something we've seen with his offenses. They've been very fantasy friendly. So I think it makes sense to buy the Bucs in general. I think that I will probably be buying the Bucs a lot. I don't know if Bucky will make a lot of sense at his price, just because of what I talked about with the historical context. The one guy who I think he didn't quite fit into these groups, because it's not like his year 2 was bad. He had like 1,400 scrimmage yards. But if you look at like year 1 to year 2 efficiency, there was a massive drop off. And so this is an okay example. It's Devon Achane. They're not similar players. At the end of the day, like, Achane's just better. Like when I looked at the two comparatively, like it was like, okay, the percentage dip from year 1 to year 2 is really similar. And if we see a rebound from Bucky that was similar to Achane's year 2 to year 3 rebound in terms of efficiency, that would be good enough for him to still be really good for fantasy. But Bucky's just below. He's just lagging behind Achane and all these, because Achane is so good. But in terms of like the dip, it was like 7.8 yards per carry as a rookie to 4.5 yards per carry his next year for Achane, and then that bumps back up to 5.7 in year 3. For comparison, Bucky dropped from 5.4 yards per carry to 3.4 yards per carry from year 1 to year 2. Avoided tackle rate, HN was at 29% his rookie year. That dropped all the way to 18% in year 2. And so it's like, is HN worse? Like a lot of these metrics would say so, but also I think it was a lot of circumstantial stuff that was going on there. And then it bounces back up to 24% this past year, year 3 for HN. Bucky's dropped from 29% in year 1 to 22% in year 2. So maybe we see a rebound in year 3. Yards after contact per rush, 5.1 for HN in year 1, all the way down to 2.9 in year 2, and then back up to 4.1 this past season. Bucky's was at 4.03 his rookie year, and then down to 2.33 in year 2. So maybe that is someone who can inspire some confidence that a better year 3 could be coming for Bucky. Bucky doesn't have the speed that HN has, obviously, but he does have the big play ability that we saw a ton in year 1, where he was creating all these explosive plays because of his ability to break tackles, create yards after contact, and also just like make these crazy full field reversals and reads where he just gets really creative and just finds space, runs to the space, and all of a sudden it's 20, 30 yards. And that is what boosts a lot of these efficiency stats. We didn't see a lot of that this past year. And then so if things are better, if the offense is better, I think that he could be better, but it would truly, he has to be a massive outlier statistically. And that's within the context of all running backs. When you add in the fact that he's also small and he was also drafted late, and we've already seen him be used situationally, it will be a different coaching staff than it was this past year, but we've seen him like lose short yardage work, lose passing down work and stuff like that. So I think Rachaad White might leave, but if he's still part of this backfield where he's not even a full-time player, like it's an extremely thin bet to expect him to be like a highly productive fantasy player, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, I still believe in the talent. I think you broke it down. It's really, to me, he has one of the best and most unique stop and start ability. Part of those full cutback runs is because it's not just the vision, it's the ability to stop and start and go from 0 to 60. We saw that with Kenneth Walker in the Super Bowl, just that you see that patience, that pitter patter, stop, let the blocks develop and then explode through. And in addition to that, it was just next level contact balance. You talked about that yards of contact. I still believe in the talent, Jacob. I think he's better than where he was drafted. It's just ultimately, I think, at least a bet on, do you think the Bucs offense can get back to those Liam Cohen levels that kind of led to him being the fantasy asset he was 2 years ago? That I'm remain unsure of, but time will tell in that regard. Let's move on to our next player.
CeeDee Lamb. So CeeDee Lamb had the fewest fantasy
wait. I have good Vidanometer on confidence.
Okay.
I was 6.4 for Bowers, 9.9 for Jeanty. Bucky, I'm going to give a 5-1.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb had the fewest fantasy points of any season in his career in 2025. He scored 3 touchdowns, so that was the first time that he had fewer than 5 in a year. If you felt it, if you drafted CeeDee Lamb top 5 or whatever, you definitely felt it. It wasn't actually that bad of a year, though, if you dig into it. 2.38 yards per route run, so that's tied for the second best of his career in any season. He missed 3 games. He played fewer than 50% or ran fewer than 50% of the routes in 3 additional games. It really wasn't that bad of a year. He had 110 or more yards in 6 games, which is pretty wild because he only played 12 healthy games. For reference, in his monster 2023 season, he hit that 110 mark in 8 of 17 games. So it was pretty close this year in only 12 games. He had a 30% target share that year. And it did drop a little bit this year, but if you look at the healthy games that he played, it was 26% in those games, which is plenty, especially if the offense is really good, which I think that it has the potential to be. Dan and I in the season dug into which coaches helped the offenses the most, who was the coach of the year for fantasy purposes. And we landed on Brian Schottenheimer, man. He had a really phenomenal year doing all the stuff that we like to boost efficiency and maximize his best players. So 26% target share in healthy games this year, and that came with a career high average depth of target. And he continues to shred man coverage. So to me, those two things really speak to his upside, which again, the 110 plus yard games, I think speaks to his upside that is available here, even if the target share isn't quite as high as we've seen when it's just him and Brandon Cooks and stuff, I think he can coexist with Pickens and be super, super productive still if this offense is really good, which I think that it could be. The offensive line play is good. The quarterback play is good. The coaching is good. He is wide receiver 1 in receiving yards versus man coverage over the past 3 years by a landslide. He has averaged 3.94 yards per route run versus man coverage over the past 3 years. Also wide receiver 1. Fantasy Points Data's separation charting graded his man coverage separation scores as slightly better than George Pickens, who's also really good against man coverage, and in the same range as like Jamar Chase and Chris Olave and some of the best players in the league. I think he's still a really, really good player. And if you dig into the data, like it's not way different than that massive year he had a few years ago, which was Brian Schottenheimer calling the plays. I think it's just that we have Pickens now, and so there might be some games, especially if he's getting deeper targets, there might be some games where Lamb isn't quite as safe, isn't quite as insulated as he has been in the past, where he had a massive target share. But what I was encouraged by is I dug into the 12 healthy games, and he had a 32.6% first read target rate in those games. So 33% in those 12 healthy games. In 2023, in his monster season, he had a 33.7% first read target rate. That's per the Fantasy Points data suite. So really, it's not that different. Even if you remove the first 2 weeks. So the first 2 weeks, it was like all Lamb. Pickens wasn't quite into the offensive flow that much. And then like later in the year, in the middle part of the year, it felt like Pickens was kind of dominating. I was giving some splits where it's like Pickens is just beating him out. He's better for fantasy right now. Even if you remove those first 2 weeks, he still had a 32% first read target rate from week 7 on. CeeDee Lamb did. So the biggest difference that I found digging into all of Lamb's data is that he didn't force very many missed tackles this year, which is weird. That's something that he's been really good at in the past, like one of the best yards after the catch receivers in the league. In 2023, his missed tackles forced per reception number was 0.16. It was 0.24 in 2024. This year is 0.09. I think that could be just kind of random. Nothing else that I've seen like indicates that Lamb was bad. Maybe he wasn't quite healthy or something, and that affected it. But also that's a kind of volatile stat. So if that bounces back, then maybe we get some bigger plays. Maybe we get some more touchdowns, stuff like that. At first, I had Lamb as like kind of a back into the first round pick, but the more I've dug into it, I think the only guys who I would clearly take ahead of him for 2026 are Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Bijan Robinson. So still kind of in the same range he was last year. I just think these other players have pushed ahead of him, some of these guys.
Yeah, I'll go 9.7 on my Danometer for Lamb. I'm just as enthusiastic about this. It does seem like we have a bit of a trend here with some of the players we're breaking down. A lot of them were injured last year. Their injuries impacted their play, and people are either going to be biased in my mind against it. This is just the nature of fantasy football. I think the easiest, if I had to look at this from a top-down standpoint at any point, Jacob, and be like 30,000-foot view of fantasy, how is the best way to find value in any given year? It's generally speaking taking players who were injured the year before. Right. It's just how it goes. That's human nature. There's some psychology to it that I could probably dive into if I did some studying and actual research with my life, but I haven't. Regardless, though, I do think one part of the Lamb outlook is interesting that I want to touch on here, Jacob. And it's something that came to my mind after listening to him speak with Matt Harmon. I don't know if you caught this at the Super Bowl. Lamb talked about that he played a lot more in the slot this past year because they had big Pickens on the outside. The Cowboys have franchise tag Pickens. I don't know where that's going to go. It could lead to a tag and trade. That seems to me, if I had to guess, I still think that might be the likeliest given the Cowboys' nasty cap situation. But we'll see. They might be able to fit Pickens somehow. I don't know. I don't think Pickens will play on the tag, though. I think that will be a big problem for them, and I don't think they want that kind of nonsense in their camp and offseason. So I don't think that's the solution, make him play under the tag. Regardless, last year, Lamb talked about with Matt Harmon, there's a misconception he believes in people's minds that it's easier to play in the slot because you have a two-way go. And what he was trying to say is, yeah, you do have a two-way go as a receiver, but it's easier for the defense to allocate more bodies and more players to defending you when you're in the slot. Versus on the outside, a lot of the times, yeah, you're going to play a top corner, but on the outside, you have one guy to beat. Now, that wasn't always the case. Before Pickens got there to Dallas, it was most difficult for Lamb to be on the outside as the boundary receiver because, and I watched this on tape multiple times, the Giants, Wink Martindale did this every time he played the Cowboys. You could play On the boundary, you could play man over, and you could have inside leverage with your corner or outside leverage with your corner, and you could have a safety shaded over the top playing cloud coverage. This is what you see against Justin Jefferson a lot of the time. And it was the case against Lamb when he was playing boundary on the outside. So that, to me, is even more difficult than playing in the slot and having two guys on. You have two guys on you on the boundary, and you have less room to work with because you don't have the two-way go if you're playing on the boundary as a receiver. So I think what he's saying is true in a sense, but ultimately speaking, will teams adjust to that? Will they play a different style with Pickens on the outside? If Pickens on the outside, that comes to mind for me. It's important because I do think for fantasy, ultimately, Lamb's role last year, yes, he was playing hurt, but that's not the same. Like, that's not the maximized role. That's not the role that led him to 1-1 overall in fantasy football, that 2-year span where he was able to do it, or the 1-year span and then he was drafted into the next year. I do think they need to find a way to use him more on the boundary and move Pickens occasionally into the slot a little bit more often than they did last year for Lamb to make some of those big plays happen. And I think when you look at it, like, is it fluky that his yards per after reception came down? Yes, potentially, but it also could be just the result of what he talked about with Matt Harmon, which is when I'm in the slot, there's just a little bit less space to work with and a little bit less of an opportunity for me to make people miss. He didn't say that. I'm speculating on that, and create those big plays for us that we need in fantasy football. So I have that in mind, Jacob, but I'm still extremely confident for a lot of reasons. The rapport with Dak Prescott, the fact that that Cowboys offensive line was injured for a lot of last season, and it really stymied them at times. And ultimately speaking, he'll be a player I'll be investing heavily in as well.
Yeah, and I don't know about the slot stuff. I wonder if that might just be kind of something that's in his head, like, because he had a 36% slot rate, which is the second lowest of his career.
Interesting, yeah.
I think if anything, being paired up with Brian Schottenheimer is just really, really good. It's the best role he's been in since the Kellen Moore days, and I think he's a better player than he was then. So I just feel really bullish about him. I don't know. I don't really feel like nitpicking any of the like usage stuff. I think he's pretty much just in a position to be really, really good as long as he's healthy. It might not be perfect. It might not be the absolute perfect role for him, but I think it's close enough.
I'm with that too. I mean, you're not going to have many more bets in round one that have the consistency aspect, the rapport aspect, the talent, the offensive aspect with potential for a lot of scoring. It's really across the board a really good investment in my mind.
Yeah. All right, let's hit our second break, and then we're going to get back with another player who did miss time this year. But I'm not quite as confident that he'll be a great buy next year, but I do think you'll get him at a discount. I think there's massive upside for him. It's Rome Odunze, but we'll be right back after these ads.
Critics agree Landman is a hit.
We roll the dice one last time.
Men die. Oil companies don't.
I'm really curious where you'll land on Odunze. I think Odunze versus Luther Burden is going to be one of the most interesting topics for fantasy going into 2026. Because we saw what this offense could do, and it was just the first year. So Caleb, all these pieces are so young, and just getting more and more time in the Ben Johnson system, like we could have some huge results. Maybe the answer is just Colston Loveland. But there's definitely upside for somebody like Odunze and or Burden. We'll see what happens with DJ Moore. So Odunze, man, came out hot. You saw the upside right away. 15 or more PPR points in each of his first 4 games to open the season, including 30 plus in one game, and then he completely fell off a cliff. He was basically not usable for fantasy the rest of the year after that first month. So his target share just completely crashed after the week 5 bye week. The Bears really leaned on the ground game. And Odunze did leave a lot on the field. So what I've got is the catchable, the reception rate on contested catch opportunities that were charted as catchable. So if it was a contested catch that you could have caught, according to Fantasy Point Status charting, they watch every play. How many of those did you catch? The only receivers who had worse rates than Odunze were BTJ at 29%. That's so crazy. 31% DK Metcalf, 35% Tedero McMillan is something to keep an eye on. 39% Chris Olave, 42% Emeka Egbuka, and 44% Rome Odunze. So these are players who had as many contested catch opportunities that were charted as catchable and had a worse catch rate. I think if you look at that list, that's not really that much of a surprise. That's not really Olave's game. Tedro McMillan is the one who stood out to me, but like it should be Odunze's game, it feels like. And if that isn't part of his game, that does scare me a little bit because there are other options that the Bears can go to within scoring distance. And I think that he really is going to need touchdown upside if he's going to be, if he is this, like, we've got this hypothetical idea of like how big the upside could be. I think it does have to come through touchdowns some, because I do think he's going to have a hard time pushing his target share very high. And I wonder if he continues to struggle on these contested catches, that it will be something that causes him to lose out even more. So the rest of the Bears receivers combined to catch 71% of their catchable contested target opportunities from Caleb Williams. So 71% for all the other Bears receivers as a whole, compared to 44% for Odunze. And I do wonder if that inefficiency might be a problem in a crowded room. Overall, Odunze dropped 17% of his catchable targets, not just contested, just like all of his catchable targets dropped 17% of them. That was the second worst rate in the NFL. That tied with Theo Johnson, who Giants fans are very familiar with. As I've been tweeting out all this Jackson Dart film this offseason, people just hate Theo Johnson, which sucks. He's a young guy. Give him some grace. So yeah, this all makes me a little bit nervous. The reason I say that I think he's going to need the touchdowns and I worry about the targets is because Luther Burden is coming, man. If I can share my screen here, it's just like, it's kind of the Omar's coming here. That's kind of how I feel about Luther Burden, dude. Luther Burden accounted for 43% of the Bears receiving yards when on the field this past year. 43%. When Luther Burden is on the field, he accounted for 43% of the team's receiving yards. So that's the highest rate of any receiver dating back to 2000 under the age of 22. That includes Malik Neighbors, Odell Beckham, some really good players, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. It's a small sample size, so I don't want to overreact to that. I did look up the splits when Burden and Odunze and Loveland were all in the field, and Burden, it wasn't anything like this. It was just, Loveland was dominating, and then Odunze and Burden were kind of getting the leftovers. But still, I do think that Burden is potentially a really prominent player. The stat I've got on the screen here is route win rates versus man coverage this year. It's an area where Odunze's been good. He's good against man coverage, but Burden is also good against man coverage. He's one of the top rates here. And so as I think about this, it's like, who do you go to in high leverage situations if you're the Bears? I think it's Loveland. I think it's pretty clearly Loveland. And then who's like the down to down win rate, kind of the success rate guy for this offense? I think it's probably more Luther Burden, and I think he has the ability to beat man coverage as well, so he could just kind of develop into the wide receiver one for the team. And that leaves Odunze in this kind of weird spot where he's like mostly just a downfield weapon, which is kind of what he became. He had a 14.4 yard average depth of target this past year in the Ben Johnson system. And so if Burden's kind of the more natural fit as the design target guy, and he can go out and win on the perimeter and stuff like that against man coverage, then I don't know exactly what the role would be for Odunze. I think it feels like it would kind of be reliant on touchdowns and winning in contested catch situations. So that's the bear case. The bull case is like the offense is really good and he's a top 10 pick, and like a lot of Matt Harmon, a lot of film people really, really believe in Odunze. I feel like we've seen flashes of it on film in terms of being able to win as a route winner, being able to win at the catch point. I know I brought up the stats haven't been good, but at times it's been good. Even being able to win with the ball in his hands. Like, I do think he can be a really good player in a really good offense. So if you look at the players that he's going to be drafted around, the upside for him will almost always be higher for Odunze than the players he's being drafted around. It's just like, what is the actual chance of him getting to that upside? It feels really flimsy. I'm curious where he heads at on Odunze after year two.
It's so interesting, Jacob, because I do remember the show we had at some point, like week 6, week 7 range, where we're like, Rome Odunze, look at all these unreal numbers. This is the buy of the year in fantasy. Like, what's stopping him? And then just everything changed. And I think as we move forward, you broke down the case for Luther Burden. I thought what was interesting about your breakdown, Jacob, is you spent a lot of time breaking down the things that could go wrong for Odunze from a fantasy standpoint. And within that time frame, we didn't even talk about the number one thing I think that could go wrong for Odunze. It's Colston Loveland, the beast of all beasts, who also developed an incredible rapport with Caleb Williams down the stretch run. In my opinion, is going to be an absolute stud next year for fantasy football, as he was in the fantasy playoffs for those of you who held on to him long enough. And I look at the piece of the pie and I worry. Now, here's my thing. I'll start with like 2.4 on the confidence meter for Odunze, but that can be upgraded to like the mid to high sixes for me if all of this comes into context. So what you'll see sometimes in fantasy is a lot of people like us talking about the situation with Odunze, talking about Burden, talking about Loveland, talking about the fact that the Bears are still a run-first team. Let's be honest. Like, that's still a team that can and wants to design things to run game 3. Like, Caleb Williams, in my opinion, is not at the point yet where he is just dropping back and running a pass-first, rhythmatic pass game offense. For, like, Odunze's skill set, honestly, I like it a lot. And you broke down the film, guys like Matt Harmon who like it. I've always liked his tape. I don't think his skill set fits Caleb Williams as a quarterback, personally. I don't think that's the right fit. Like, he's not for Caleb. I think the skill set that fits it more is Loveland and Burden. So all of that in mind, I could still go up to the mid to high sixes on Odunze if all of this analysis turns into paralysis by analysis, Jacob, and his ADP just plummets, which I could totally see happening, to a point where it's like you said, like, the players you're drafting around him are not in good offenses and they're not as talented and they don't have as good tape as Odunze. So while I'm out at him where I assume he'll be right now from a capital standpoint, I think I could get back in on him. It's going to be tough for me to see myself really buying. I don't even think I'm going to probably buy Burden at his inflated price. Like, after what's going to happen this offseason, Jacob, you know what's going to happen with him. His stock's going to go insane. People are going to be thinking they're getting the breakout receiver in a Ben Johnson offense. And I don't necessarily think that role is guaranteed either. So it's going to be interesting drafting Bears this offseason.
Yeah, I want to ask you just like straight up who you are pulling the trigger on, if choosing one for Dynasty or this year. If there's a distinction, I guess go for it. But I think it's basically the same question.
That's a good.
Are you taking Luther or him? I think like obviously an oversimplification, but 2.36 yards per run for Luther Burden, playoffs included, compared to 1.54 for Odunze in his second season compared to the rookie season for Burden. I think it's Burden for me.
It's Burden for me too. The injury aspect of Burden's profile is a little troubling, but not like, look, Burden, you could say like, why would you take Burden in the sense of like Odunze was a top 10 pick, Burden was a second round pick. A lot of people watch Burden's tape were like, this could easily be a first round pick.
Yeah.
It's just, he was in a weird system at Missouri. He basically played slot only. There were a lot of aspects of what we saw on his tape in Missouri where we're like, if he gets with the right coordinator and the right coach who has a different vision for him, we could possibly get more out of him. And that coach is Ben Johnson. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. I think his skill set better fits Caleb. So I would actually be with you on that and taking Burden over Odunze in Dynasty and most likely redraft for me as well.
I think his skill set does better fit Caleb, and it also just better fits fantasy. I think having a dominant downfield winner, an X receiver like Odunze is great for your real life offense. Odunze has 4 games across 2 years where he has had more than a third of the team's receiving yards in the game. Luther already has 4 of those games, and he barely got to play as a rookie. He had a 46% route rate as a rookie. Odunze had a 91% route rate as a rookie. So you're looking at basically 2 full seasons. So Odunze missed some time this year, but most of 2 seasons. And Luther already has the same number of games where he accounted for a third of the team's receiving yards. As I look at them, it's like this comparison might feel weird. They're not similar players at all, but in the same way that Jameson Williams is a good player and we've seen him, when given opportunities, be really good for fantasy, I wonder if Odunze might just kind of be the odd man out, where it's just there's not many times where he's needed in a big way. And so how do you ever really know when to start him? Are you just going to start him and get 2 or 3 catches, and he's just kind of this weird player for fantasy where it's like, I guess if there's an injury, he's really good. But otherwise he's just kind of, it's Loveland and it's Burden and it's the run game and it's Caleb scrambling. And then there's like Odunze too, but for fantasy, he's just kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think back to like watching Odunze's tape coming out of Washington, because he was in that class where the Giants took neighbors, and he was in that process for me to watch a lot of tape on him. And part of what comes to mind is that 75% contested catch rate at Washington, that big over the top role, and things that I just didn't see translate yet in fantasy and the NFL level and the Bears offense. Ben Johnson, I'm not so sure will. Like, specifically, is he going to be this big red zone winner? I think he can be. Again, it's just like at Washington, they used him in the screen game and he was really good after the catch. I think he does have juice after the catch, but I don't think that's how he's being used. And I don't think specifically Caleb Williams is looking at him as this is my go-to guy in the red zone. I don't think that's how Ben Johnson's offense has really ever worked. And it's not how it worked last year with Chicago. So that scares me if he's not getting a lot of touchdowns. And then the second part is the contested catch aspect, which he was dominant at Washington. Penix was a different kind of thrower than Caleb Williams. I don't really see a lot of, Caleb drives the ball at all times. There's just not a lot of arc on his throws. I just don't know the fit with Caleb Williams if it's something I love. But I could totally see us being wrong on this, by the way, if he just like hits a lot of touchdowns, which is kind of what was happening at the beginning of the year last year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, if he is that guy in high leverage situations, then the upside's massive.
Right.
But I don't know. My bet would firmly be on Loveland being that guy in high leverage situations. I think he's the clear best matchup problem for defenses, and we saw it. We saw it down the stretch where it was like everybody knew. The commentators are talking about Loveland constantly, where it's like they've got to stop this guy. Like, good luck stopping this guy. He's a problem. Ben Johnson loves him. Like. And they're just going to him in the red zone. They're getting him isolated one-on-ones and stuff. And we saw the usage at the end of the year was like, if this guy exists this way in the offense and is this good, then you're just 2 or 3. You're not ever going to be 1 really because he's 1. And that's how it feels to me with Loveland at this point.
With you on that.
All right, let's talk about another year 2 receiver. It's lad McConkey.
Yeah, your boy.
This one's fully a leap of faith. Because what he put on film in year 1 was really that good, and I think it does warrant the leap of faith. So Ladd McConkey and Omarion Hampton are our next 2 players. Both of them, I just feel like with Mike McDaniel coming over, if the offensive line is better, is healthier, there could be so much space in this offense. There could be so many things for defenses to try to account for, and the best version of it, I know you guys are sick of hearing this every single offseason with the Chargers and Justin Herbert, but the best version of this offense is like one of the best producing offenses in the league for sure. Like, full stop, could be top of the league. And I want really talented players within that. So to me, Ladd kind of feels like a similar bet to Odunze, where it's like there's target competition problems. Even like his separation scores came down a little bit from year 1 to year 2, which worries me a little bit. I'm going to dig into his film more for sure this offseason, but it's like, I just want to bet on someone who I think is really good in this really good offense. And at least we've seen the explosive production from Ladd at times, which we haven't seen so much from Odunze quite yet. So I think he's one of the best bets. Like, if I'm looking at him, BTJ, Odunze, you could throw Marvin Harrison Jr. into this, like receivers who we know are really talented, but have kind of struggled early in their careers here. I think he's the most likely to bounce back. You and I mean, we wax poetic about Justin Herbert every opportunity we get. We feel so confident in this. How do you think Mike McDaniel fits with Herbert and with this offense? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. So this is a 7-9 confidence factor for me. Would be even higher if there weren't that as many talented players on this Chargers offense from a skill position standpoint. That's the only thing holding it down for me. And I want to start by saying the reason being, again, I'll bring it back up and I'll keep talking about it all offseason on BTB. And we're going to talk about all the different new coaches and coordinators and situations and find more for you. But our biggest wins last year, Jacob, were the wins that were our offensive scheme and coordinator-based wins, Jacksonville and Chicago. This is going to be the best win of the offseason from a schematic, and offensive coordinator standpoint, from a fantasy football standpoint. Mike McDaniel with this Chargers offense, if Joe Alt is healthy, and he should be, if Rashawn Slater is healthy, and he should be. Plus, from what I'm hearing, the Chargers are, this is what I've heard, are going to be big players for Tyler Linderbaum in free agency, the star center from the Ravens that is likely to hit the market.
That's exactly what they need.
Yeah, exactly. So if they get Linderbaum in there too, I mean, we're talking about a situation where I think everyone, Jacob, here's my main thing. And again, I could see myself with a crazy amount of Justin Herbert shares this offseason, some Ladd shares, some Quentin Johnston shares, some back end Trey Harris shares. I know for a fact Odunze Gadsden is going to be on a lot of my rosters. That is so far my biggest one. But because I think a lot of people view this connection between Mike McDaniel coming over to LAC, and they think about just what they've recently seen from McDaniel, right? Which is 2 years of broken Tua. What do? I'll just spam Devon Achane, and I'll spam my tight ends, whoever that be. It was like Dulcich for a little while, Darren Waller. It was the kid, the dominant guy who went to the Steelers and died this offseason. Who was it? Jonnu. This is an awesome player. Like, a good coach can use him, but obviously you give him Arthur Smith that, and it's like, oh, I don't need this guy. And I think about it, and I'm like, everyone's thinking about that version of McDaniel offense. What about the version before Tua was broken, when they were literally tearing it up from a fantasy standpoint in the passing game, and guys were just breaking over the middle of the field with insane amounts of space?
Yeah,
I'm thinking of Ladd McConkey on a Mike McDaniel old school Tua, when he had Tyreek and Waddle, and Tua was actually playing decent football, in breaking routes with crazy amount of space. McDaniel designing these unbelievable, like, McDaniel has never had a quarterback like Herbert, ever. Not many people do.
He's had the anti-Herbert.
And if we have Slater, Alt, and Linderbaum on the offensive line healthy, McDaniel scheming up stuff for Herbert, with McConkey breaking over the middle on in-breakers with insane amounts of space, like we used to see from Waddle and Tyreek. That's where I start to think about, like, are we going back to that old Dolphins offense? Because I know McDaniel did run things through the run game and HN in the pass game and the tight end recently. But before that, we date back 2-3 years ago with that Dolphins offense. We were seeing 300+ games from Tua over and over and over again. And it was a pass-first offense, because if he's able to do it, you're going to get more chunks in the pass game. So, I mean, I'm through the roof on this team. This is going to be one of my biggest investments all offseason, the Chargers offense. It'll be Herbert. It'll be McConkey. It'll probably be all pieces of this offense. I know most people right now are focused on Hampton because of what they've seen recently with McDaniel, but I'm more focused on what we had in the past with McDaniel.
Yeah. One thing, we're about to hit another break here, but before we do, I wanted to tell you that I looked it up on Keep Trade Cut, which is like dynasty perceived value, just made by the consensus. The masses like vote on these players and they get a consensus value. And McConkey is literally, it's back to back to back to back. McConkey, and then Odunze, and then Marvin Harrison Jr., and then Brian Thomas Jr., and then Luther Burden below them. So like I said, like all those guys that I just talked about that I think are like, who's going to bounce back? He's probably the most likely. That's where consensus has it too, but only like marginally. And I think, I don't know, I guess he doesn't have quite as much draft capital as Odunze and Harrison Jr. and BTJ. And so that might be affecting things a little bit here, but I feel like the upside is so high for a year 3 bounce back that I would actually push him up a little bit. And so that's something I want to get to when we get back. Cause like, look at his value. Kenneth Walker is another one who I think is really interesting. We're going to get to later. I think that's kind of the most instructive thing we have right now is kind of like dynasty perceived value. We can kind of get an idea where people's heads are at. Like Emeka Egbuka is still well ahead of McConkey. Rashee Rice is ahead of McConkey. Yeah.
Egbuka. Wow.
Yeah. Let's hit a break here. We'll get back. We'll talk about McConkey and Hampton and just keep getting excited about this Chargers offense. What could go wrong?
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
This is European soccer's biggest stage.
Written in the stars! What a difference she has made!
The question is, can you handle it? Can you handle it?
The crowd here feels electric.
Stream every match of the UEFA Women's Champions League on Paramount Plus.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons.
It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Alrighty, ahead of Ladd McConkey in perceived value for dynasty purposes, we find Tedro McMillan, definitely for me. George Pickens, I think they're actually really similar. Nico Collins, I'm fine with that. Mecca Ibuka, I think they're really similar. Ibuka is younger, has upside, but McConkey's only 1 year older. And I think that who's more likely to blow up next year and have like a monster year is probably McConkey. Rashee Rice, clearly no. I would much rather have McConkey. He's a year and a half younger, and also there's not all the other off-field stuff to worry about. And I think he's a better player. Chris Olave, that one's really close. McConkey's younger and plays with Justin Herbert. I think there's more upside for him, but I get it with Olave. Garrett Wilson, that's fair, I guess, but it's just like, when's it gonna change? Like some guys just get the short straw, Sorry.
Certainly not this year. It's not gonna change.
Yeah, I think I would take McConkey, and then it's clearly McConkey over Odunze, BTJ. I think Burton's interesting, but I would probably take McConkey. So that's where my head's at with him. Is there anybody who stands out that you're different?
I just think it's funny. You're like, when's it going to change? Jets fans have been asking themselves that question for 25 straight years. When is it going to change? And maybe a little less than that. They did have the Sanchez runs for a little bit of time there, the 2-year span with the Sanchez. But yeah, I'm pretty much along the same. I'm in agreement with you on most of that. I think, first of all, I hear some names. Like I think Ibuka is a wildly overrated dynasty asset for sure. That's not one I'm in on at all.
I could see it.
I didn't know he was up there with that.
I could see it, man. I mean, what he was doing at the beginning of the year, it wasn't a big sample of it, but it's like, okay, here's a clear, here's proof of what he can be, for him to do that so early. I mean, you guess, it was like he was winning in a variety of ways, and it ended up the back half was kind of rough, but he is a rookie and he was asked to do everything, and he's playing through an injury. True. The offense fell apart, and they're just like, save us, please.
Yeah. You know what? I don't want to get buried again. We've got buried in the past for Ibuka takes. I don't want to get buried. I still believe in Ibuka, but I think I'd probably have him a bit lower there. Who were the other names that go one more time? Go over them again. I just want to see where I'm at with them.
Rice, Olave, Garrett Wilson, George Pickens.
Okay, I take it back on the Ibuka. Rice has to be the most overrated dynasty asset right now out there. Like Rashee Rice, I want nothing to do with. If he's still valued in that range, I would trade him immediately. A, I don't think the Chiefs are going to invest in him long term, so he's not tied to Mahomes. B, I think the only real reason he's good in fantasy is because of his role in that offense. I mean, he's a pretty talented player, but not at the level of some of these players. So yeah, I think that's the biggest one that I see, the biggest difference.
Yeah. And I know people, you might feel weird about this. You might feel irritated with the Chargers or whatever.
Yeah.
Let me just point you towards Chris Olave, who's all the way up here ahead of him now at wide receiver 14, and just say that you're injury prone till you're not. It's inevitable. True. It's going to happen again. I've seen it happen. It's going to happen again until it doesn't. And then the talent wins out. And Olave didn't even he had Kellen Moore boosting things, and he had semi-competent quarterback play. And that was all that was needed. And all of a sudden, he can do this. We know how good he is. I think McConkey is a similar type of talent. He's not quite the blue chip that Olave is as a top 10 pick, but he's not way far off. We saw what he could do his rookie year. It was phenomenal. And he actually has ridiculous potential for boosting factors from his offense that Olave didn't. Olave, it's the best case is Kellen Moore pushes this up into a middle of the pack or maybe even slightly better offense for fantasy. That's what Kellen Moore does, but it's that's what Mike McDaniel does too.
Right.
And he has Justin Herbert, yeah. So to me, that's with McConkey is I know injury is a concern. Maybe the offensive line will just never be healthy or whatever, but it's such a clear path towards it working. It's just that they need to be they just need to not have the worst luck in the whole league when it comes to injuries. And it will probably be pretty dang good. Maybe that's oversimplifying it because there is target concerns.
I see what you're saying. And I want to be clear on something, just thinking back to it. With Ibuka, for me, I do believe in the talent. I was just thinking back to some of the tape I watched, and he was getting open on the vertical plane. Baker wasn't getting the ball there. I just have weird vibes about Baker right now and that entire offense and how it's going to transform if Evans moves on or what happens with that. So it's just not a fantasy asset I want to get in. As far as McConkey goes, or some of the players you mentioned, Olave is the interesting one to me because, like you said it, albeit while it was inconsistent quarterback play overall, though great moments from Shuck, I feel like the best part of Shuck was his rapport with Olave. That's why, I feel I'll probably be buying in, which is crazy to do. You don't really want to buy in on Olave in Dynasty or or even redraft coming off a career, that type of season. But I think that rapport continues to grow. And as long as Olave stays healthy, he's going to be dominant, because the thing with Olave is where he wins is exactly what fits Shuck's skill set, right? Like a lot of it was these 3, 4, 5-step drops from Shuck, ripping out pass, and Olave can win those outbreakers with ease. But then also he can turn that into an inbreaker, and he can kind of redefine the route and get vertical at times. It's all three different stems off that route that all could get open for Shuck, and I feel like it really fits well. And the difference I would say for Olave versus McConkey is Olave is more of a winner on the outside and on the boundary than McConkey. So that's the one drawback I have. It's not a drawback, but I just think about like, okay, when McDaniel's offense was ripping with Tua, it was outside receivers on inbreakers. It's kind of like the whole 49ers offense, the Shanahan offense. Where does McConkey fit in that? We'll see. I just think he's too good of a talent for them to kind of not utilize. And his rapport with Herbert is also strong.
That's interesting. I think McConkey can shred. I would agree that like Olave is clearly a better, like has better verticality to his game as a perimeter guy, but I think McConkey can definitely like win quickly off the break against press coverage and stuff like that. And
he can win on the release and line of scrimmage. Let me be clear. Yeah,
I think it'll be a really good fit with Mike McDaniel.
I do too.
So let's talk about Hampton. Omarion Hampton had a really weird rookie season. He honestly, like if you just look at the box scores, he had at least 60 scrimmage yards and 15 touches in every game except for week 2. He had 2 really big games, week 3 and week 4. He had 129 and then 165 scrimmage yards. It was against the Broncos and the Giants. So Adam Hazer has brought up that if you like remove the Giants game, that his advanced rushing numbers don't look that good, which is fair. They're still better than league average, but like with the Giants game, it's like he looks like one of the best running backs in the league. But I don't think it's just that game. I thought he played well against the Broncos. I thought he played really well against Dallas at the end of the year, which also is a good matchup, an easy matchup. But to me, like it was overall an encouraging rookie year. And again, like there was just no space. Like you have to like take into consideration like what he was dealing with. So again, this like when he got at least 1 yard blocked, his numbers were really good. They're actually slightly better than like Jeanty and Bijan Robinson's that I referenced earlier. So I think that's encouraging. And then like next gen stats really liked him. If you look at yards over expectation, and then also like the percentage of runs that gained positive yards over expectation, he looks really good in both of those. If you look at their they have some interesting stats that measure like the efficiency of movement in terms of how much movement was taken vertically and horizontally before getting to the line of scrimmage, how much time was spent behind the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. Hampton profiles extremely similarly to Saquon Barkley. All of their next gen stats look almost like copy pasted. And if you look at the stats where it was like, how much did they get when there was actual blocking? Again, like almost identical, but I think both of them dealt with really bad blocking this year. I don't think he's as good as Saquon, but it's like Saquon's honestly one of the closest comps from a physical standpoint. This guy is such a monster in terms of just like size, speed, start, stop, everything. Like he doesn't have the skill set necessarily that Saquon has, but like he can make these just ridiculous plays. And I think it's interesting that he profiled similarly on paper when I looked at all this stuff. I don't know, man. I think if he's a risky pick, but if there is more space in this offense, it could just be crazy with him, where we're seeing like him just rip off runs like we've seen from Achane. They're different types of running backs, but like if we get him in space, that's to me when I watch his rookie film where it looks bad is where he's like there's no space and his contact balance and stuff isn't quite where you would like it to be, and he's just kind of getting knocked off track a little bit too easily. I think that stuff could be better. I didn't think that was a huge problem for him in college necessarily. But he didn't look like he really found his footing very well his first year, and it was kind of a disjointed year. But I'm just saying, man, what if we can just kind of alleviate for that and kind of create space for him, because we've got awesome quarterback play, awesome pass catchers, and an offensive coordinator who's proven to be really good at creating space, even when he didn't have good line play and didn't have good quarterback play, didn't really have, obviously you have Tyreek Hill, but you don't have a quarterback whose arm really threatens defenses that much over the top. Now you do, So I wonder if like this might be such a good setup for Hampton to get some of these chunk plays over and over and over.
Yeah, Hampton's like a 9.6 for me on a confidence meter, but more of an 8.8 because of the investment. I think as I was talking about earlier, Jacob, with McDaniel offense and what it's going to look like, and I think people are underrating the passing aspect of it based on recency bias. I think it'll be the opposite for a player like Hampton. I think people will be like, Devon Achane, oh my God, now it's Hampton, and his price tag is going to get insane this offseason. I still think it'll probably be worth investing in, though. That's the crazy part. And I was so high on him coming out of UNC. We talked a lot about him on last year on the pod. I just loved his tape at UNC. I never saw Barkley, though. I find that super interesting what you talked about, like how all the advanced stats and stuff say he was played a lot like Barkley. Now, is that Barkley over his career? They look a lot like, or is that Barkley over just this year? Yeah. Barkley over just this year was just such a different play. I feel like that to me, when I hear that, Jacob, I'm just like, oh, the two teams that just were getting blown up in the backfield and had like their offensive, their run scheme was just so shot. Yeah. And it was so interesting to hear, like during the year, like the Eagles kind of altered their run scheme, and that's why Jeff Stoutland's out. And it's like, how stupid do you have to be? Like
the Eagles don't even get
offensive line coach in the history of football in the middle of a season.
Don't get stuck on the Eagle stuff, brother. I know. It's a black hole.
I'm loving it, though. Oh my God, am I loving this Eagle stuff lately? The potential demise is unreal. But as far as that goes, like with Hampton, I always saw more Jonathan Taylor with him. And because of the thing you broke down a little bit earlier, you mentioned a little bit earlier, which is like, to me, he runs upright. So when he doesn't get that space, it's similar to Barkley in some ways, but when he doesn't get that space, it can look ugly. But he'll get that space this year. Like, first of all, the thing with Rashawn Slater is he's a better run blocker than pass blocker. Rashawn Slater gets the second level and creates a lot in your run game.
Did not play at all this year for people that
did
don't
not
know.
play at all. Yeah, he was injured in the preseason towards
probably
ACL.
Their best player. Like if you look at Madden going into the year, he was their highest rated player, above Justin Herbert, above all.
I hope we never reference Madden again on this podcast to describe who are the best players on a team.
I'm just saying like that.
Yeah, I know.
Like, he legitimately might be the best player on the team, and there's a lot of talented players on the team.
This is true, especially in the run game. He just does such a good job of getting his second level, and he should be fully healthy for the season. He tore his ACL in the preseason, so he'll be more than good to go. But also, and I think it's either them or the Giants for Linderbaum this free agency. Linderbaum's a much better run blocker than pass blocker, and he's really good against the second level too. He's insanely athletic. If they add Linderbaum and Slater to that line, we could be looking at an unbelievable situation for McDaniel to maximize a player like Hampton. So I'm very confident. And then we didn't even touch on this, but like, I always thought he was a more natural receiver than he was given credit for as a prospect when I watched his North Carolina tape. What if McDaniel unlocks something in his passing game that we're not available? He's just like, oh, I want to get this kid the ball in space because he's sweet in space. Like, I'll figure out ways to do it. He can catch. Like, then we're talking about a player who is at the Devon Achane level with a better offensive line in a better offense that's going to score a lot more touchdowns, and maybe not as talented as Achane, but certainly in that range. And that, to me, is ultimately a basically a back end to mid first round pick possibility.
Yeah, there's so many things to get excited about, man. The Linderbaum stuff, like, a big part of why Achane bounced back in a huge way is because Aaron Brewer was kicking butt from the center position, and in a really cool way where McDaniel could weaponize him, moving him around on stuff. That would be huge. All right, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. Back into the first round potentially is like the upside for him if everything feels good, the offensive line is healthy, if they get Linderbaum, for example, that kind of stuff. If we feel really, really bullish, I want to bring up some names. James Cook is your guy. Who are you taking right now?
Cook or Hampton?
Yep.
Ooh, I was gonna be so out on Cook if Brady was gone. Like, Brady makes Cook for me, but Brady's back, and I do have a little bit of upside to the possibility of Carmichael coming in there and like being like, all right, dude, it's James Cook. What are you doing not using him in the pass game? If that starts to happen, he could be unreal. This is a tough question. I love them both. I think I'm gonna go Cook though.
If the Bengals don't add anything running back, Chase Brown or Hampton?
Hampton, but that's tough too. I just think the Bengals will add something though. So Hampton.
Okay. If Daniel Jones is presumably the starting quarterback, but isn't like feeling great week one, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen there. Jonathan Taylor or Hampton?
I think I'm going Hampton.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a really bullish outlook, but I think
Taylor's second half of the season was kind of nasty fantasy asset wise.
No doubt. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the type of upside we're looking at for Hampton.
Or Jacob froze.
I'm here. I don't know.
Difficulty here.
If you can hear me, sweet. We are going to move on to Kenneth Walker, and I wanted to talk about his consensus on keep trade cut because I think it's really interesting. So the two players who have moved up the most on KTC over the past couple weeks are Kenneth Walker and Colston Loveland. And still, Kenneth Walker is behind RJ Harvey, is behind Kyron Williams, is behind Chase Brown, Cam Scattaboo, Saquon Barkley, CMC. I'm going to have to repeat this whole list for Dan, unfortunately, when he gets back. Breece Hall, Bucky Irving. So to me, those are pretty much all wrong. If you see on the screen here, I've got the stat that I gave earlier where it was league leaders in yards per rush, if only including runs where initial contact was met 1 or yards past the line of scrimmage. Ken Walker is up here at the very top. It's Devon Achane first, then Jahmyr Gibbs, then Travion, which is obviously boosted by big plays for all those guys. And there's Kenneth Walker, who, it's boosted by big plays too, but he doesn't get as many of the just clear, massive breakaway runs as these other guys. He averaged 7.5 yards per carry on these runs where there's at least 1 yard past the line of scrimmage. I think we saw in the playoffs like how good this guy really is. That was something that we, talked about a lot going into the year, but it wasn't until Zach Charbonnet went down that we got to really see him unleashed. And when we did, it was 139 scrimmage yards per game in the playoffs, 75 PPR points across 3 games without Charbonnet. So to me, this consensus ranking is just way too low. I think he's going to keep pushing up. Like he's clearly going to move above RJ Harvey if I had to guess. And I think it makes sense that he'll probably push up into like the RB 12-ish range. So Dan, I'll give you the list of guys that are ahead of him and where I think he should be. I'm really
I got it messed up.
We're on Kenneth Walker.
Okay.
I'm really curious where you'll land on him. We'll kind of find our spot together. The last stat I wanted to give on Walker, there were 7 running backs who had over 45 missed tackles forced per fantasy points data is charting in 2025. It was Ashton Jeanty had 46. Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey each had 47. James Cook had 48. Kenneth Walker had 61. Jahmyr Gibbs had 63. And Bijan Robinson had 75. Walker had way fewer touches than those guys. None of those guys were sharing a backfield. I guess, Gibbs kind of did at the beginning of the year. James Cook kind of did at times. But we're looking at just total missed tackles forced. If you look at the percentage of touches where they forced a missed tackle, it's Walker by a huge margin. Like, was just unbelievable this year. And that's what we've seen from him. I mean, for his career, this dude averages over 3 yards after contact per rush and has a avoided tackle rate above 30%. He's the only one in the NFL that has hit those rates during that time. He's really good. We've seen that now in Charbonnet tore his ACL. Like, I think it's going to be his backfield basically wherever he goes. We don't know that. We can't say that for sure. We don't know how off seasons will shake out. But I think at this point, like, you have clear proof of concept that he's a very good player and he's going to be locked into at least like a really prominent role as an early downs player. We don't know what his passing down role will be wherever he lands. That's a concern for him. But the guys who are above him, Dan, are RJ Harvey, clear no for me. Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, Cam Scattaboo, Chase Brown, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, Quinshon Judkins. And then you get up into guys that I think are clearly, deserving of being ahead of him. It's Hampton, it's JT, it's James Cook. The Jeremiah Love kid, people are definitely taking ahead of him. I'm curious. To me, it's like running back 12-ish, the same tier as like Bucky, CMC, Breece, Judkins, Kyron, and Saquon. I think they're all sort of similar. And Walker has the potential to push much, much higher than a lot of those guys. He's still, he's the same age as RJ Harvey, guys. He's 25 years old. We know exactly what he can do. Where do you think he fits there, Dan?
It's been interesting. Look, I've made a lot of coin avoiding Walker. I don't think I've had Walker on any roster since he's entered the NFL because I've never viewed him as a good fantasy asset. But a lot of that was because of Zach Charbonnet and because of the lack of the passing game role. These are just not players I invest in. But as I watch Walker, man, and it's so hard not to think this, like, I feel like I'm watching one of the best running backs in the NFL. That's how it felt watching him in the playoffs. The patience, the pacing behind the line of scrimmage. I was watching with some friends in the Super Bowl. We have a big Super Bowl party every year. And my one friend was like, is this not Le'Veon Bell? And I was like, yeah, it kind of, the one run where, and he had multiple of these, the one run where he's just pacing behind the line of scrimmage, lets the block develop and then hits his hole. it is Le'Veon Bell-esque, but it's also like, well, it's Le'Veon Bell with a ton more burst. It's Le'Veon Bell with a lot more stop and start ability. And it's Le'Veon Bell with aspects that Bell never had, in the sense of, like, in a phone booth, he can make a man miss right away on a run play that's blown up in the backfield and should be a tackle for a loss. Boom, makes a man miss, and now has something else ahead of him that he lets develop and then create. So it's like, as an actual talent, I think he's so good that I'm opening myself back up to investing in him. You said, look, if he's resigned by the Seahawks, shoot him through the roof for me. Like, I am very high on Walker if he goes back to the Seahawks. If he doesn't go back to the Seahawks and becomes a free agent, you said it, still a big opportunity for him to be a really good fantasy asset. With that said, it becomes a trickier situation, because could he get in another situation where he's not utilizing the passing game as much as he should be, in my mind, and then the red zone work. So I do need to wait and see. It's just always going to be a part of his profile. I think we might be freezing out here, but hopefully you can still hear me, Jacob. But yeah, I'm definitely more open to it. There's a lot of players you mentioned in that range. I think it's a pretty good spot for him where you have him.
Okay. Yeah. If you're ever freezing out, dude, I'll just take over and start talking about stuff. We'll just get you back on whenever you can. We've had really everything that you could hope for in a Beyond the Box Score return here. We were 10 minutes late to start. We've had technical difficulties throughout. We've gone on a little bit longer than expected. We go on random tangents about players we weren't expecting to talk about. It's everything. It feels good to be back. Kenneth Walker, I'm basically right where I'm at with somebody like Bucky Irving, where it's like, I know the player is really, really good. I just don't know for sure how it will play out for fantasy purposes. I don't typically invest in those types of players that much for dynasty and at the running back position, but I don't think it's a bad player to have. I'm on one of my dynasty teams, and I manage like 15-ish teams with my brother. That's kind of where I'm at with Kenneth Walker, where, like, that the upside could hit, where he is one of the best running backs in the league, point blank. He was PFF had him as the top graded running back this year. Like, I watched his film last year. I'm like, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm like, this is little Adrian Peterson. Like, this guy's insanely good and can win in so many different ways. So if he gets put in a situation where he is, supported by his offensive environment, then I think it could just explode, which is what we saw in the playoffs. Again, 139 scrimmage yards per game, 75 PPR points across 3 games. That's without a huge receiving role. So really, really bullish on Walker. The last 2 players I wanted to hit on are Ricky Pearsall and Sam LaPorta. So injuries for both of these guys. Pearsall is the one who's really, I think, going to bother people. Because he's a round 1 receiver. There's been a lot of excitement around him. We've seen these Kyle Shanahan receivers be really good for fantasy, and so people who have invested in him have been really excited for him, but it just hasn't really come to fruition. So let me give you the Pearsall case. Let me give you the case with this extremely young player who's in a really good situation, and if he's able to not get shot, not have any serious injuries, I think could have a really big year 3. So Ricky Pearsall had a higher first down per route run rate. I'm talking about first downs because they're actually really important and predictive for fantasy purposes. We'll have Ryan Heath on the program later this offseason multiple times for sure to dig into all of this. First downs are important. He had a higher first down per route run rate than Chris Olave, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf, the Indianapolis Colts wide receivers, even Jalen Coker, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Juwan Jennings. He was really, really productive on a per opportunity basis. He had 108 yards in week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks defense. He had 117 yards in week 3. He also had games of 96 and 85 yards. He averaged over 2 yards per route run on the year per the fantasy points data suite. If I can share my screen here. I showed you a tweet earlier that you thought was a Luther Burden tweet when in fact it was a Ricky Pearsall tweet. Qualified wide receivers with a route win rate of 30% or higher versus man coverage in 2025. Number 1, Devontae Adams. Number 2, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Number 3, Michael Wilson. Number 4, Ricky Pearsall. He shreds man coverage. This is something we already knew going into the year. It was confirmed again for us this year. So I think clearly a really talented player. I don't know what to expect with his health, but if he can stay healthy, he's a really talented player in an offense that we know can just be a fantasy point print shop. George Kittle's out. And Jawan Jennings just is getting older. And who else is it going to be? Maybe they bring somebody in, maybe they draft somebody that cuts into this. But as we stand like right now and look forward to next year, who is like, I think overwhelmingly the most likely to be a big part of the offense, to take a big step forward, it's Ricky Pearsall. And might be the cheapest that he's ever going to be. He had the second highest route win rate among receivers with 250 or more routes, behind only Devontae Adams. If you're looking at all routes, not just man coverage, like he really, if you watch his film, was really, really good. But I think there were parts of the season where he was just not emphasized at all in the offensive game plan, because it's like, okay, he's been out for a month. We're going to try to kind of work him back in. There was that weird stretch where it's like, he's healthy, but until he's able to be full speed, we're not going to be able to get him back in. Like, so he has to get his cardio up and stuff like that. There were the 2 games where he came back, he barely was looked at all. I remember the Arizona Cardinals film, like watching all of it. I'm like, he's wide open down the field, but they're just not looking to him because they're designing short stuff to Christian McCaffrey and stuff like that. For a lot of the season, the Niners were kind of in survival mode where they're trying to figure out like, okay, we lost another guy. Like how, like, it's just like each week was like a new task where they had to like figure out, okay, like now how do we fit this puzzle together, you know? And I just don't think Pearsall really was able to kind of find much momentum in all of that chaos. And I think this is probably one of the best buy opportunities of any player at any position, the way I see it, in terms of just talent and quarterback play and team and everything lining up, and the price being really, really cheap, not reflective of that at all. All right, I think Dan's back. I'm not sure. I'm going to talk about Sam LaPorta. So Sam LaPorta is another guy whose price is way down, and we know is a really talented player. He has a good quarterback, and he plays in a good offense. Just a couple of years ago, this guy was the tight end 1 for dynasty purposes. I think he was taken as the tight end 1 in redraft leagues as well. And now we've had a lot of other tight ends emerge, and Sam LaPorta, hasn't done quite as much. So maybe he's kind of like fallen off in people's minds. He's not like the clear, overwhelming generational talent that somebody like Brock Bowers is. But if you look at like his statistical output for somebody so young, he's just behind Bowers and Trey McBride and some of these guys, in terms of early career production. Sam LaPorta has really been incredible. And guess what? He had a career best yard per route run rate this year. I think it just went under the radar because he missed games. But he had a really good year. He averaged 2 yards per route run. He has 7 career games now that he has had more than 75 receiving yards. 3 of those came this year. 2 of his 4 career games with 90 or more receiving yards came this year, and he only played 9 healthy games this year. So when he was out there, it was encouraging for sure. His route rate was up, so they were using him as like a focal point of the offense and getting him emphasized more than they had in the past. His route rate was often pushing up into like the 85-90% range, which is one of the most important stats at the tight end position. Is like, are they actually out there getting opportunities to win routes? LaPorta was, and he was really, really productive with those opportunities. He had 4 games with a target share of 22% or higher, which is great for tight ends. The only tight end who had a higher target share than 22% this year was Trey McBride. I don't think it was a coincidence that like JMO's takeoff this year coincided with the LaPorta injury. And so as I look forward, like everything is there for him to be really good. And we just saw this past year that he can be really good in moments, in games, even with Ben Johnson gone. And so he's the clearest. Him and Tucker Kraft, I think, are the clearest discount tight ends that could be elite. Like I would hear you out if you're here, Dan, on Arunda Gadsden. But I do think there's so many mouths to feed there that it's tough to really feel confidence placing that bet. Whereas LaPorta, we've seen that he can be somebody who's a presence in the red zone, can create yards after the catch, can be a big part of the offense, can even push up into the 20% target share range with regularity. And so I feel really pretty good about hitting the button on him if you do miss out on the other tight ends at the top end range, because I think it's pretty realistic that he could be up in that exact same range as like Trey McBride and some of those other guys. I know that sounds crazy after the year that McBride just had, but everything came into perfect alignment for McBride to have that year. I think LaPorta is a really, really good talent. And so he's somebody who I would be comfortable bouncing back next year.
Hopefully I'm here. I'm not sure if
You're here.
I don't know what's going on. This is the worst injury we've had in BTV history. I don't know if on my end. I apologize for that, everyone. This will hopefully be fixed by the next time. We've had bad weather here on the East Coast, and I've had these issues. But with that said, I want to quickly say I couldn't agree more. First of all, I want to quickly say I couldn't agree more with you on Pearsall. I think he's one of the easiest buys of the offseason. When you combine the efficiency of the pass game under Brock Purdy, the lack of weapons there, the clear and obvious depressed ADP that he's going to have after his injured season, after how many people got burned by him, to me, it's one of the easiest buys of the offseason. As for LaPorta, I was never going to be in on this with you, but now I am because he got Drew Petzing. And I really think it's as simple as that. If you listen to, and this was another great interview that Matt Harmon did with Trey McBride at the Super Bowl, you could just understand the idea and you could just understand why it worked so well for McBride with Petzing as his offense coordinator with the Cardinals. It's his ability to not only design an offense that features a tight end like a McBride or now like a LaPorta as he comes over to the Lions, but it's how he understands how to couple the routes that those guys run, like specifically McBride in Arizona, versus the coverages that they face, and to find those opportunities for the tight ends, which I think will carry over for LaPorta. And I think from Goff's standpoint, from the standpoint of the Lions passing game, they do need some more simple solutions that they just weren't getting last year in the passing game to get the ball out of Goff's hand faster. He's not a quarterback you want holding the ball a lot in the pocket because he's not someone who can create when a pocket breaks down. And he's not someone who can create as the play moves on. You want the ball out for a player like Goff. So I think that'll work perfectly. Flip side of that, it's like, I don't know if I loved him last year. I don't know if I'm going to be buying a lot of Trey McBride at his cost, to be honest, after losing Drew Petzing. I really think it's a big deal. There's also a lot of quarterback uncertainty there, but I do really think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you. All right, I said it wouldn't be, it was the perfect Beyond the Box Score episode here with all the randomness that happened throughout. It actually wouldn't be the perfect Beyond the Box Score without this right here, which is a random Bill inclusion at the end. Honorable mention, number 11.
Dead may never die.
A bust, a huge bust. The last running back picked in the NFL draft, but somehow we, the sickos, got ourselves thinking he was going to be some huge fantasy producer for us. Dude, this was such a funny moment. I reconnected with an old friend and we got to go, I went to his house to watch a Chiefs game for his birthday. And so it's just like this random thing. I don't have any idea what I'm going into. And I end up meeting his grandpa and sitting down, it was his dad. It was his dad was there and I'd never met him before. We're sitting down and watching the game. And they were like, who do you think's the biggest disappointment from fantasy this year? It's like it was the Chiefs-Texans game, week 13 or 14 or something. Okay. And, we go around the room and it's BTJ, this and that, and this old guy goes, Bill. And I'm like, did he just say Bill? And it was just like such an amazing moment because I was like,
never expected him to know or say.
I know. I'm like, this guy's that it like clicked where I'm like, he almost has to be like overwhelmingly likely that he's watching Beyond the Box Score. Like how, like that's such a like Beyond the Box Score coded answer, like that you would be like, who was the biggest disappointment this year? Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was.
I feel like if it even is at the point where he could mention that, he is the biggest fantasy disappointment just because that's the case.
Oh my gosh, that was so funny to me.
That's epic.
Yeah, so this is the stat I've referenced this several times here. It's like yards per carry when there's at least 1 yard blocked. And I underlined a couple players here for the sickos. Shout out my buddy EJ. Shout out his dad. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt right here with some of the best running backs in football, right? 7 yards per carry if you just give the man a little bit of room to run. Is this real? No, we're just having fun here at the end. But I mean, who knows?
I don't think it's not.
They really liked him. Well, it's like different offensive coordinator. We don't know what the offense is going to look like. I think there's a really good chance they'll add something at running back. But if they just roll with him and Rodriguez, I could see it. Maybe I do think I think this is at least validation, and the film too. And in some instances, we didn't get a lot of it. At least validation that he is a good player. He's a decent NFL player and could be productive in the right situation. So there you go.
Damn good.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great spot. Yeah, it was an auto spot.
ADP will be depressed again. Jaden Daniels will be back in that offense. I'll probably
Bill. Oh my gosh, what a year! What a weird year it was.
It could be like our Loveland situation where we're never wrong. We're just early.
Yeah. I mean, Loveland's like
I'm
platinum. Like
it's not Colston Loveland, but I mean, last year, look, a lot of people were disappointed in where we had Loveland ranked preseason. But if you were able to hold on to him and start him in your fantasy playoffs, you won because of him. Like
I had a really funny metaphor that came in my head when I was digging into all the Brock Bowers data. Is that like Brock Bowers is like Bitcoin? Brock Bowers is like buying Bitcoin, where it's like I don't want to get into that. If you guys don't believe in that or whatever, that's fine. I don't care. But like he is just like he's the king, you know. Like he's inevitable even in the down years. Like it's just clear proof of concept in terms of what it could be. And then if you are into this metaphor, Colston Loveland is Ethereum. And I really think that holds true. And he like has that type of upside. Like he's awesome. He's the coolest. I think he could actually supplant Bowers because he's in such a perfect system here with Ben Johnson and for fantasy and shit, maybe for real life. The guy's so good at everything. Bill's your favorite random altcoin that your weird uncle sold you on. Where it's like there are these moments, there are these flashes where it's like, yeah, this is gonna be really cool. I'm gonna be so rich. But what are you left with? Yeah, don't check your bill bags because they are empty. Okay. What a return this was. Had a lot of fun. Hope you guys did too. Beyond the Box Score this offseason is going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited for all that we've got coming for you. Man, we've got so many deep dives. I've been watching so much film. Cam Ward, Tyler Shuck, Jackson Dart, Jaden Daniels, really excited to dig into his film from year 2 and see how defense is adjusted to him. So that's something we're going to spend a lot of time with. Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, how these new offensive play callers impacted them, what they actually did on their own, what we can expect from their pass catchers in some of these hard to decipher rooms in terms of where the targets are going to go, who the best players actually are. Just try to help you feel more confident in our feel on all of that, because honestly, like if Caleb and Trevor like deliver, those are 2 of the best situations for fantasy. Like I was talking with my brother yesterday and it's like, I think Trevor Lawrence is there's a real chance he's like a top 7 or 8 quarterback again this next year, you know. Like he was looking at his dynasty team and didn't feel that great about him. Like Trevor could put up points, dude. He just straight up won leagues this year. I had leagues where I was going into the championship and I was like an overwhelming favorite. I'm looking at the guy's team like, how did he even get here? And it was, Trevor Lawrence. That's how
I won Jamie's Superflex League as a 6 seed with Trevor Lawrence as one of my quarterbacks.
Yeah, just saved bad teams, you know.
Yep.
And it like I think that understanding how these situations might play out is going to be really, really important for fantasy, because like so much of what helped Trevor for fantasy was that he had all these rushing touchdowns. And so like I think the value add we're going to do, we're obviously going to get into the rookies and stuff. That's going to be a lot of what we do in April. But I think digging into the 25 stuff is going to be really, really important.
Yes.
Not only the film, but also for fantasy purposes. Like we've got Ben Gretsch and Ryan Heath coming on. I'm really excited for that episode where we're going to team up with them. And those guys do such a good job of looking at the trends of fantasy football in terms of how we're drafting and kind of like the psychology behind it all, and the philosophy of what's working and what's not, and how to like shift your philosophy as you look forward to how you draft your teams, where you're able to find value even in this extremely like oversaturated space where there's so much content going out. I think our strength is more of digging into kind of the real life player stuff and how that can then impact fantasy in terms of the players, the coaches, everything there. And I think having them on to kind of like zoom out and give us like this like bigger picture view of the fantasy space itself is going to be really, really informative for people. I'm really looking forward to that episode. It's going to be a lot of fun this offseason, man. I'm really looking forward to it. Welcome back. I'm glad you're here to sign off. Yeah.
I'm really excited. I thankfully that this has been the worst internet I've ever had on BTB. I got to reset this router, but thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sickos coming in the grind of an early February episode. But please, if you do enjoy the show, help us grow the show. The real key here, in my mind at least, will be please hit the like button on every show you watch. Please leave comments, but also subscribe. We're going to have a new YouTube channel. We need to get that off the ground. And then please remember, if you leave us a rating and review on iTunes and Spotify, it helps us get into the algorithm. It helps us get into people's searches during the offseason where they're like, I want to find a new fantasy football pod. We believe, Jacob and I strongly believe, if you give us a shot, and those who don't know the show, when they give us a shot, they like it and they stay with us. But the key is getting them to give us a shot. So please help us grow the show. We really appreciate those who do. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.